Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Western Canon Challenge, where we are reading the entirety of the Western literary canon out loud. Today we are continuing in Miss Lonelyhearts by Nathanael West, and we are up to the chapter entitled Miss Lonelyhearts and Mrs. Shrike. And with that said, I'll get started. Miss Lonelyhearts lay on his bed fully dressed, just as he had been dumped the night before. His head ached and his thoughts revolved inside the pain like a wheel within a wheel. When he opened his eyes, the room, like a third wheel, revolved around the pain in his head. From where he lay, he could see the alarm clock. It was 3:30. When the telephone rang, he crawled out of the sour pile of bedclothes. Shrike wanted to know if he intended to show up at the office. He answered that he was drunk, but would try to get there. He undressed slowly and took a bath. The hot water made his body feel good, but his heart remained a congealed lump of icy fat. After drying himself, he found a little whiskey in the medicine chest and drank it. The alcohol warmed only the lining of his stomach. He shaved, put on a clean shirt and a freshly pressed suit, and went out to get something to eat. When he had finished his second cup of scalding coffee, it was too late for him to go to work. But he had nothing to worry about, for Shrike would never fire him. He made too perfect a butt for Shrike's jokes. Once he had tried to get fired by recommending suicide in his column. All that Shrike had said was, "Remember, please, that your job is to increase the circulation of our paper. Suicide, it is only reasonable to think, must defeat this purpose." He paid for his breakfast and left the cafeteria. Some exercise might warm him. He decided to take a brisk walk, but he soon grew tired, and when he reached the little park, he slumped down on a bench opposite the Mexican War obelisk. The stone shaft cast a long, rigid shadow on the walk in front of him. He sat staring at it without knowing why until he noticed that it was lengthening in rapid jerks, not as shadows usually lengthen. He grew frightened and looked up quickly at the monument. It seemed red and swollen in the dying sun, as though it were about to spout a load of granite seed. He hurried away. When he had regained the street, he started to laugh. Although he had tried hot water, whiskey, coffee, exercise, he had completely forgotten sex. What he really needed was a woman. He laughed again, remembering that at college all his friends had believed intercourse capable of steadying the nerves, relaxing the muscles, and clearing the blood. But he knew only 2 women who would tolerate him. He had spoiled his chances with Betty, so it would have to be Mary Shrike. When he kissed Shrike's wife, he felt less like a joke. She returned his kisses because she hated Shrike. But even there, Shrike had beaten him. No matter how hard he begged her to give Shrike horns, she refused to sleep with him. Although Mary always grunted and upset her eyes, she would not associate what she felt with a sexual act. When he forced this association, she became very angry. He had been convinced that her grunts were genuine by the change that took place in her when he kissed her heavily. Then her body gave off an odor that enriched the synthetic flower scent she used behind her ears and in the hollows of her neck. No similar change ever took place in his own body, however. Like a dead man, only friction could make him warm or violence make him mobile. He decided to get a few drinks and then call Mary from Delahanty's. It was quite early, and the speakeasy was empty. The bartender served him and went back to his newspaper. On the mirror behind a bar hung a poster advertising a mineral water. It showed a naked girl, made modest by the mist that rose from the spring at her feet. The artist had taken a great deal of care in drawing her breasts, and their nipples stuck out like tiny red hats. He tried to excite himself into eagerness by thinking of the play Mary made with her breasts. She used them as the coquettes of long ago had used their fans. One of her tricks was to wear a medal low down on her chest. Whenever he asked to see it, instead of drawing it out, she leaned over for him to look. Although he had often asked to see the medal, he had not yet found out what it represented. But the excitement refused to come. If anything, he felt colder than before when he had started to think of women. It was not his line. Nevertheless, he persisted in it out of desperation, and went to the telephone to call Mary. "Is that you?" she asked, then added before he could reply, "I must see you at once. I've quarreled with him. This time I'm through." She always talked in headlines, and her excitement forced him to be casual. "Okay," he said. "When? Where?" "Anywhere. I'm through with that skunk. I tell you, I'm through." She had quarreled with Shrike before, and he knew that in return for an ordinary number of kisses, he would have to listen to an extraordinary amount of complaining. "Do you want to meet me here in Delahanty's?" he asked. "No, you come here. We'll be all alone anyway, and I have to bathe and get dressed." When he arrived at her place, he would probably find Shrike there with her on his lap. They would both be glad to see him, and all three of them would go to the movies, where Mary would hold his hand under the seat. He went back to the bar for another drink, then bought a quart of scotch and took a cab. Shrike opened the door. Although he had expected to see him, he was embarrassed and tried to cover his confusion by making believe that he was extremely drunk. Come in, homebreaker," Shrike said with a laugh. "The missus will be out in a few minutes. She's in the tub." Shrike took the bottle he was carrying and pulled its cork. Then he got some charged water and made 2 highballs. "Well," Shrike said, lifting his drink, "so you're going in for this kind of stuff, eh? Whiskey and the boss's wife." Miss Lonelyhearts always found it impossible to reply to him. The answers he wanted to make were too general, and began too far back in the history of the relationship. "You're doing field work, I take it," Shrike said. "Well, don't put this whiskey on your expense account. However, we like to see a young man with his heart in his work. You've been going around with yours in your mouth." Miss Lonelyhearts made a desperate attempt to kid back. "And you," he said, "are an old meanie who beats his wife." Shrike laughed, but too long and too loudly, then broke off with an elaborate sigh. "Ah, my lad," he said, "you're wrong. It's Mary who does the beating." He took a long pull at his highball and sighed again, still more elaborately. "My good friend, I want to have a heart-to-heart with you. I adore heart-to-heart talks, and nowadays there are so few people with whom one can really talk. Everybody is so hard-boiled. I want to make a clean breast of matters. A nice clean breast. It's better to make a clean breast of matters than to let them fester in the depths of one's soul." While talking, he kept his face alive with little nods and winks that were evidently supposed to inspire confidence and to prove him a very simple fellow. "My good friend, your accusation hurts me to the quick. Your spiritual lovers think that you alone suffer, that you are mistaken. Although my love is of the flesh flashy, I too suffer. It's suffering that drives me into the arms of the Miss Farkases of this world. Yes, I suffer." Here the deadpan broke, and pain actually crept into his voice. "She's selfish. She's a damn selfish bitch. She was a virgin when I married her, and has been fighting ever since to remain one. Sleeping with her is like sleeping with a knife in one's groin." It was Miss Lonelyheart's turn to laugh. He put his face close to Shrike's and laughed as hard as he could. Shrike tried to ignore him by finishing as though the whole thing were a joke. "She claims that I raped her. Can you imagine Willie Shrike, wee Willie Shrike, raping anyone? I'm like you, one of those grateful lovers." Mary came into the room in her bathrobe. She leaned over Miss Lonelyhearts and said, "Don't talk to that pig. Come with me and bring the whiskey." As he followed her into the bedroom, he heard Shrike slam the front door. She went into a large closet to dress. He sat on the bed. "What did that swine say to you?" "He said you were selfish, Mary. Sexually selfish." "Of all the goddamn nerve! Do you know why he lets me go out with other men? To save money. He knows that I let them neck me, and when I get home all hot and bothered, why he climbs into my bed and begs for it, the cheap bastard." She came out of the closet wearing a black lace slip and began to fix her hair in front of the dressing table. Miss Lonelyhearts bent down to kiss the back of her neck. Now, she said, acting kittenish, you'll muss me. He took a drink from the whiskey bottle, then made her a highball. When he brought it to her, she gave him a kiss, a little peck of reward. Where'll we eat? She asked. Let's go where we can dance. I want to be gay. They took a cab to a place called El Guacho. When they entered, the orchestra was playing a Cuban rumba. A waiter dressed as a South American cowboy led them to a table. Mary immediately went Spanish and her movements became languorous and full of abandon. But the romantic atmosphere only heightened his feeling of icy fatness. He tried to fight it by telling himself that it was childish. What had happened to his great understanding heart? Guitars, bright shawls, exotic foods, outlandish costumes, all these things were part of the business of dreams. He had learned not to laugh at the advertisements offering to teach writing, cartooning, engineering, to add inches to the biceps and to develop the bust. He should therefore realize that the people who came to El Guacho were the same as those who wanted to write and live the life of an artist, wanted to be an engineer and wear leather puttees, wanted to develop a grip that would impress the boss, wanted to cushion Raoul's head on their swollen breasts. They were the same people as those who wrote to Miss Lonelyhearts for help. But his irritation was too profound for him to soothe it in this way. For the time being, dreams left him cold, no matter how humble they were. I like this place, Mary said. It's a little fakey, I know, but it's gay, and I so want to be gay. She thanked him by offering herself in a series of formal, impersonal gestures. She was wearing a tight, shiny dress that was like glass-covered steel, and there was something cleanly mechanical in her pantomime. Why do you want to be gay? Everyone wants to be gay, unless they're sick. Was he sick? In a great cold wave, the readers of his column crashed over the music, over the bright shawls and picturesque waiters, over her shining body. To save himself, he asked to see the medal. Like a little girl helping an old man to cross the street, she leaned over for him to look into the neck of her dress. But before he had a chance to see anything, a waiter came up to the table. The way to be gay is to make other people gay, Miss Lonelyhearts said. Sleep with me, and I'll be one gay dog. The defeat in his voice made it easy for her to ignore his request, and her mind sagged with his. I've had a tough time, she said. From the beginning, I've had a tough time. When I was a child, I saw my mother die. She had cancer of the breast, and the pain was terrible. She died leaning over a table. Sleep with me, he said. No, let's dance. I don't want to. Tell me about your mother. She died leaning over a table. The pain was so terrible that she climbed out of bed to die. Mary leaned over to show how her mother had died, and he made another attempt to see the medal. He saw that there was a runner on it, but was unable to read the inscription. My father was very cruel to her, she continued. He was a portrait painter, a man of genius, but... He stopped listening and tried to bring his great understanding heart into action again. Parents are also part of the business of dreams. My father was a Russian prince. My father was a Paiute Indian chief. My father was an Australian sheep baron. My father lost all his money in Wall Street. My father was a portrait painter. People like Mary were unable to do without such tales. They told them because they wanted to talk about something besides clothing or business or the movies, because they wanted to talk about something poetic. When she had finished her story, he said, You poor kid, and leaned over for another look at the medal. She bent to help him and pulled out the neck of her dress with her fingers. This time he was able to read the inscription. Awarded by the Boston Latin School for first place in the 100-yard dash. It was a small victory, yet it greatly increased his fatigue, and he was glad when she suggested leaving. In the cab, he again begged her to sleep with him. She refused. He kneaded her body like a sculptor grown angry with his clay, But there was too much method in his caresses, and they both remained cold. At the door of her apartment, she turned for a kiss and pressed against him. A spark flared up in his groin. He refused to let go and tried to work his spark into a flame. She pushed his mouth away from a long, wet kiss. "Listen to me," she said. "We can't stop talking. We must talk. Willie probably heard the elevator and is listening behind the door. You don't know him. If he doesn't hear us talk, he'll know you're kissing me and open the door. It's an old trick of his." He held her close and tried desperately to keep the spark alive. "Don't kiss my lips," she begged. "I must talk." He kissed her throat, then opened her dress and kissed her breasts. She was afraid to resist or to stop talking. "My mother died of cancer of the breast," she said in a brave voice, like a little girl reciting at a party. "She died leaning over a table. My father was a portrait painter. He led a very gay life. He mistreated my mother. She had cancer of the breast. He tore at her clothes, and she began to mumble and repeat herself. Her dress fell to her feet, and he tore away her underwear until she was naked under her fur coat. He tried to drag her to the floor. "Please, please," she begged. "He'll come out and find us." He stopped her mouth with a long kiss. "Let go of me, honey," she pleaded. "Maybe he's not home. If he isn't, I'll let you in." He released her. She opened the door and tiptoed in, carrying her rolled-up clothes under her coat. He heard her switch on the light in the foyer, and knew that Shrike had not been behind the door. Then he heard footsteps and limped behind a projection of the elevator shaft. The door opened and Shrike looked into the corridor. He had only the top of his pajamas. Miss Lonelyhearts on a field trip. It was cold and damp in the city room the next day, and Miss Lonelyhearts sat at his desk with his hands in his pockets and his legs pressed together. A desert, he was thinking, not of sand but of rust and body dirt, surrounded by a backyard fence on which are posters describing the events of the day. Mother slays 5 with axe. Slay 7. Slays 9. Babe slams 2. Slams 3. Inside the fence, desperate, broken-hearted, disillusioned with tubercular husband, and the rest were gravely forming the letters Miss Lonelyhearts out of the whitewashed clam shells, as if decorating the lawn of a rural depot. He failed to notice Goldsmith's waddling approach until a heavy arm dropped on his neck like the arm of a deadfall. He freed himself with a grunt. His anger amused Goldsmith, who smiled, bunching his fat cheeks like twin rolls of smooth pink toilet paper. "Well, how's the drunkard?" Goldsmith asked, imitating Shrike. Miss Lonelyhearts knew that Goldsmith had written the column for him yesterday, so he hid his annoyance to be grateful. "No trouble at all," Goldsmith said. "It was a pleasure to read your mail." He took a pink envelope out of his pocket and threw it on the desk. "From an admirer." He winked, letting a thick gray lid down slowly and luxuriously over a moist, rolling eye. Miss Lonelyhearts picked up the letter. "Dear Miss Lonelyhearts, I am not very good at writing, so I wonder if I could have a talk with you. I am only 32 years old, but have had a lot of trouble in my life, and am unhappy married to a cripple. I need some good advice, bad, but I can't state my case in a letter, as I am not good at letters, and it would take an expert to state my case. I know you're a man, and am glad as I don't trust women. You were pointed out to me in Delahanty's as the man who does the advice in the paper, and the minute I saw you I said, you can help me. You had on a blue suit and a gray hat when I came in with my husband, who was a cripple. I don't feel so bad about asking you to see you personal, because I feel almost like I knew you. So please call me up at Burgess 77323, which is my number, as I need your advice bad about my married life. An admirer, Fay Doyle." He threw the letter into the waste paper basket with a great show of distaste. Goldsmith laughed at him. "How now, Dostoevsky," he said. "That's no way to act. Instead of pulling the Russian by recommending suicide, you ought to get the lady with child and increase the potential circulation of the paper." To drive him away, Miss Lonelyhearts made believe that he was busy. He went over to his typewriter and started pounding out his column. Life, for most of us, seems a terrible struggle of pain and heartbreak without hope or joy. Oh, my dear readers, it only seems so. Every man, no matter how poor or humble, can teach himself to use his senses. See the cloud-flecked sky, the foam-decked sea. Smell the sweet pine and heady privet. Feel of the velvet and of satin. As the popular song goes, the best things in life are free. Life is... He could not go on with it, and turned again to the imagined desert where Desperate, Broken-Hearted, and the others were still building his name. They had run out of seashells and were using faded photographs, soiled fans, timetables, playing cards, broken toys, imitation jewelry, junk that memory had made precious, far more precious than anything sea might yield. He killed his great understanding heart by laughing, then reached into the waste paper basket for Mrs. Doyle's letter. Like a pink tent, he set it over the desert. Against the dark mahogany desktop, the cheap paper took on rich flesh tones. He thought of Mrs. Doyle as a tent, hair-covered and veined, and of himself as the skeleton in a water closet, the skull and crossbones on a scholar's bookplate. When he made the skeleton enter the flesh tent, it flowered at every joint. But despite these thoughts, he remained as dry and cold as a polished bone, and sat trying to discover a moral reason for not calling Mrs. Doyle. If he could only believe in Christ, then adultery would be a sin. Then everything would be simple, and the letters extremely easy to answer. The completeness of his failure drove him to the telephone. He left the city room and went into the hall to use the pay station from which all private calls had to be made. The walls of the booth were covered with obscene drawings. He fastened his eyes on two disembodied genitals and gave the operator Burgess 77323. "Is Mrs. Doyle in?" "Hello, who is it?" "I want to speak to Mrs. Doyle," he said. "Is this Mrs. Doyle?" "Yes, that's me." Her voice was hard with fright. "This is Miss Lonelyhearts." "Miss who?" "Miss Lonelyhearts. Miss Lonelyhearts, the man who does the column." He was about to hang up when she cooed, "Oh, hello." "You said I should call." "Oh, yes. What?" He guessed that she wanted him to do the talking. "When can you see me?" "Now." She was still cooing, and he could almost feel her warm, moisture-laden breath through the earpiece. "Where?" "You say." "I'll tell you what," he said. "Meet me in the park near the obelisk in about an hour." He went back to his desk and finished his column, then started for the park. He sat down on a bench near the obelisk to wait for Mrs. Doyle. Still thinking of tents, he examined the sky and saw that it was canvas-colored and ill-stretched. He examined it like a stupid detective who was searching for a clue to his own exhaustion. When he found nothing, he turned his trained eye on the skyscrapers that menaced the little park from all sides. In their tons of forced rock and tortured steel, he discovered what he thought was a clue. Americans have dissipated their racial energy in an orgy of stone-breaking. In their few years, they have broken more stones than did centuries of Egyptians, and they've almost done their work hysterically, desperately, almost as if they knew that the stones would someday break them. The detective saw a big woman enter the park and start in his direction. He made a quick catalog. Legs like Indian clubs, breasts like balloons, and a brow like a pigeon. Despite her short plaid skirt, red sweater, rabbit-skin jacket, and knitted tam-o'-shanter, she looked like a police captain. He waited for her to speak first. "Miss Lonelyhearts? Oh, hello." "Mrs. Doyle." He stood up and took her arm. It felt like a thigh. "Where are we going?" she asked as he began to lead her off. "For a drink." "I can't go to Delahanty's. They know me." "We'll go to my place." "Ought I?" He did not have to answer, for she was already on her way. As he followed her up the stairs to his apartment, he watched the action of her massive hams. They were like two enormous grindstones. He made some highballs and sat down beside her on the bed. "You must know an awful lot about women from your job," she said with a sigh, putting her hand on his knee. He had always been the pursuer, but now found a strange pleasure in having the roles reversed. He drew back when she reached for a kiss. She caught his head and kissed him on the mouth. At first it ticked like a watch, then the tick softened and thickened into a heartthrob. It beat louder and more rapidly each second until he thought it was going to explode and pulled away with a rude jerk. "Don't," she begged. "Don't what?" "Oh, darling, turn out the light." He smoked a cigarette, standing in the dark and listening to her undress. She made sea sounds. Something flapped like a sail. There was the creak of ropes when he heard the wave against a wharf smack of rubber on flesh. Her call for him to hurry was a sea moan, and when he lay beside her, she heaved, tidal, moon-driven. Some 15 minutes later, he crawled out of bed like an exhausted swimmer leaving the surf, and dropped down into a large armchair near the window. She went into the bathroom, then came back and sat in his lap. "I'm ashamed of myself," she said. "You must think I'm a bad woman." He shook his head no. "My husband isn't much. He's a cripple like I wrote you, and much older than me." She laughed. "He's all dried up. He hasn't been a husband to me for years. You know, Lucy, my kid, isn't his." He saw that she expected him to be astonished, and did his best to lift his eyebrows. "It's a long story," she said. "It was on account of Lucy that I had to marry him. I'll bet you must have wondered how it was I came to marry a cripple. It's a long story." Her voice was as hypnotic as a tom-tom and as monotonous. Already his mind and body were half asleep. "It's a long, long story, and that's why I couldn't write it in a letter. I got into trouble when the Doyles lived above us on Center Street. I used to be kind to him and go to the movies with him because he was a cripple, although I was one of the most popular girls on the block. So when I got into trouble, I didn't know what to do, and asked him for the money for an abortion. He didn't have the money, so we got married instead. It all came through my trusting a dirty dago. I thought he was a gent, but when I asked him to marry me, why, he spurned me from the door and wouldn't even give me money for an abortion. He said if he gave me the money, that would mean it was his fault, and I would have something on him. Did you ever hear of such a skunk?" "No," he said. The life out of which she spoke was even heavier than her body. It was as if a gigantic living Miss Lonelyhearts letter in the shape of a paperweight had been placed on his brain. "After the baby was born, I wrote the skunk, but he never wrote back. And about 2 years ago I got to thinking how unfair it was for Lucy to have to depend on a cripple and not come into her rights. So I looked his name up in the telephone book and took Lucy to see him. As I told him then, not that I wanted anything for myself, but just that I wanted Lucy to get what was coming to her. Well, after keeping us waiting in the hall over an hour, I was boiling mad, I can tell you, thinking of the wrong he had done me and my child. We were taken into the parlor by the butler. Very quiet and ladylike, because money ain't everything, and he's no more a gent than I'm a lady. The dirty wop. I told him he ought to do something for Lucy, seeing he's her father. Well, he had the nerve to say he had never seen me before, and that if I didn't stop bothering him, he'd have me run in. That got me riled, and I lit into the bastard and gave him a piece of my mind. A woman came in while we were arguing that I figured was his wife, so I hollered, 'He's the father of my child! He's the father of my child!' When they went to the phone to call a cop, I picked up the kid and beat it. And now comes the funniest part of the whole thing. My husband is a queer guy, and he always makes believe that he is the father of the kid, and even talks to me about our child. Well, when we got home, Lucy kept asking me why I said a strange man was her papa. She wanted to know if Doyle was really her papa. I must have been crazy because I told her that she should remember that her real papa was a man named Tony Benelli, and that he had wronged me. I told her a lot of other crap like that. Too much movies, I guess. Well, when Doyle got home, the first thing Lucy says to him is that he ain't her papa. That got him sore, and he wanted to know what I had told. I didn't like his highfalutin ways and said, "The truth." I guess, too, that I was kind of sick of seeing him moon over her. He went for me and hit me on the cheek. I wouldn't let no man get away with that, so I socked back, and he swung at me with his stick, but missed and fell on the floor and started to cry. The kid was on the floor crying, too, and that set me off, because the next thing I know, I'm on the floor bawling, too. She waited for him to comment, but he remained silent until she nudged him into speech with her elbow. "Your husband probably loves you and the kid," he said. "Maybe so, but I was a pretty girl and could have had my pick. What girl wants to spend her life with a shrimp of a cripple?" "You're still pretty," he said, without knowing why, except that she was frightened. She rewarded him with a kiss, and then dragged him to the bed. Miss Lonelyhearts and the Dismal Swamp. Soon after Mrs. Doyle left, Miss Lonelyhearts became physically sick and was unable to leave his room. The first 2 days of his illness were blotted out by sleep, but on the third day his imagination began to work. He found himself in the window of a pawn shop, full of fur coats, diamond rings, watches, shotguns, fishing tackle, mandolins. All these things were the paraphernalia of suffering. A tortured highlight twisted on the blade of a gift knife. A battered horn grunted with pain. He sat in the window thinking. Man has a tropism for order. Keys in one pocket, change in the other. Mandolins are tuned G, D, A, E. The physical world has a tropism for disorder, entropy. Man against nature, the battle of the centuries. Key yearns to mix with change. Mandolins strive to get out of tune. Every order has within it the germ of destruction. All order is doomed, yet the battle is worthwhile. A trumpet marked to sell for $2.49 gave the call to battle, and Miss Lonelyhearts plunged into the fray. First, he formed a phallus of old watches and rubber boots, then a heart of umbrellas and trout flies, then a diamond of musical instruments and derby hats. After these, a circle, triangle, square, swastika. But nothing proved definitive, and he began to make a gigantic cross. When the cross became too large for the pawn shop, he moved it to the shore of the ocean. There, every wave added to his stock faster than he could lengthen its arms. His labors were enormous. He staggered from the last wave line to his work, loaded down with marine refuse bottles, shells, chunks of cork, fish heads, pieces of net. Drunk with exhaustion, he finally fell asleep. When he awoke, he felt very weak, yet calm. There was a timid knock on the door. It was open, and Betty tiptoed into the room with her arms full of bundles. He made believe that he was asleep. "Hello," he said suddenly. Startled, she turned to explain. "I heard you were sick, so I brought some hot soup and other stuff." He was too tired to be annoyed by her wide-eyed little mother act and let her feed him with a spoon. When he had finished eating, she opened the window and freshened the bed. As soon as the room was in order, she started to leave, but he called her back. "Don't go, Betty." She pulled a chair to the side of his bed and sat there without speaking. "I'm sorry about what happened the other day," he said. "I guess I was sick." She showed that she accepted his apology by helping him to excuse himself. "It's the Miss Lonelyhearts job. Why don't you give it up?" "And do what?" "Work in an advertising agency or something." "You don't understand, Betty. I can't quit. And even if I were to quit, it wouldn't make any difference. I wouldn't be able to forget the letters, no matter what I did." "Maybe I don't understand," she said, "but I think you're making a fool of yourself." "Perhaps I can make you understand. Let's start from the beginning. A man is hired to give advice to the readers of a newspaper. The job is a circulation stunt, and the whole staff considers it a joke. He welcomes the job, for it might lead to a gossip column, and anyway, he's tired of being a leg man. He too considers the job a joke, but after several months at it, the joke begins to escape him. He sees that the majority of the letters are profoundly humble pleas for moral and spiritual advice, that they are inarticulate expressions of genuine suffering. He also discovers that his correspondents take him seriously. For the first time in his life, he is forced to examine the values by which he lives. This examination shows him that he is the victim of the joke, and not its perpetrator. Although he had spoken soberly, he saw that Betty still thought him a fool. He closed his eyes. "You're tired," she said. "I'll go." "No, I'm not tired. I'm just tired of talking. You talk a while." She told him about her childhood on a farm and of her love for animals, about country sounds and country smells, and of how fresh and clean everything in the country is. She said that he ought to live there, and that if he did, he would find that all his troubles were city troubles. While she was talking, Shrike burst into the room. He was drunk and immediately set up a great shout, as though he believed that Miss Lonelyhearts was too near death to hear distinctly. Betty left without saying goodbye. Shrike had evidently caught some of her farm talk, for he said, "My friend, I agree with Betty. You are an escapist. But I do not agree that the soil is the proper method for you to use." Miss Lonelyhearts turned his face to the wall and pulled up the covers, but Shrike was unescapable. He raised his voice and talked through the blankets into the back of Miss Lonelyheart's head. "There are other methods, and for your edification I shall describe them. But first let us do the escape to the soil, as recommended by Betty. You are fed up with the city and its teeming millions. The ways and means of men as getting and lending and spending, you lay waste your inner world, are too much with you. The bus takes too long, while the subway is always crowded. So what do? So you buy a farm and walk behind your horse's moist behind, no collar or tie, plowing your broad, swift acres. As you turn up the rich black soil, the wind carries the smell of pine and dung across the fields, and the rhythm of an old, old work enters your soul. To this rhythm you sow and weep and chivy your kine, not kin or kind, between the pregnant rows of corn and taters. Your step becomes the heavy sexual step of a dance-drunk Indian, and you tread the seed down into the female earth. You plant not dragon's teeth, but beans and greens. Well, what do you say, my friend? Shall it be the soil?" Miss Lonelyhearts did not answer. He was thinking of how Shrike had accelerated his sickness by teaching him to handle his one escape, Christ, with a thick glove of words. "I take your silence to mean that you have decided against the soil. I agree with you. Such a life is too dull and laborious. Let us now consider the South Seas. You live in a thatch hut with the daughter of a king, a slim young maiden in whose eyes is an ancient wisdom. Her breasts are golden speckled pears, her belly a melon, and her odor is like nothing so much as a jungle fern. In the evening on the blue lagoon under the silvery moon, to your love you croon in the soft syllablu and vocablu of her languorous tongor. Your body is golden brown like hers, and tourists have need of the indignant finger of the missionary to point you out. They envy you your breech clout and carefree laugh, and little brown bride and fingers instead of forks. But you don't return their envy, and when a beautiful society girl comes to your hut in the night, seeking to learn the secrets of your happiness, you send her back to her yacht that hangs on the horizon like a nervous racehorse. And so you dream away the days, fishing, hunting, dancing, swimming, kissing, and picking flowers to twine in your hair. Well, my friend, what do you think of the South Seas?" Miss Lonelyhearts tried to stop him by making believe that he was asleep, but Shrike was not fooled. "Again, silence," he said. "And again, you are right. The South Seas are played out, and there's little use in imitating Gauguin. But don't be discouraged. We have only scratched the surface of our subject. Let us now examine hedonism, or take the cash and let the credit go. You dedicate your life to the pursuit of pleasure. No overindulgence, mind you, but knowing that your body is a pleasure machine, You treat it carefully in order to get the most out of it. Golf as well as booze, Philadelphia Jack O'Brien and his chest weights as well as the Spanish dancers. Nor do you neglect the pleasures of the mind. You fornicate under pictures of Matisse and Picasso. You drink from Renaissance glassware, and often you spend an evening beside the fireplace with Proust and an apple. Alas, after much good fun, the day comes when you realize that soon you must die. You keep a stiff upper lip and decide to give a last party. You invite all your old mistresses, trainers, artists, and boon companions. The guests are dressed in black, the waiters are coons, the table is a coffin carved for you by Eric Gill. You serve caviar and blackberries and licorice candy and coffee without cream. After the dancing girls have finished, you get to your feet and call for silence in order to explain your philosophy of life. Life, you say, is a club where they won't stand for squawks, where they deal you only one hand and you must sit in. So even if the cards are cold and marked by the hand of fate, play up like a gentleman in a sport. Get tanked, grab what's on the buffet, use the girls upstairs. But remember, when you throw boxcars, take the curtain like a dead game sport. Don't squawk. I won't even ask you what you think of such an escape. You haven't the money, nor are you stupid enough to manage it. But we come now to one that should suit you much better. Art. Be an artist or a writer. When you are cold, warm yourself before the flaming tints of Titian. When you are hungry, nourish yourself with the great spiritual foods by listening to the noble periods of Bach, the harmonies of Brahms, and the thunder of Beethoven. Do you think there's anything in the fact that their names all begin with B? But don't take a chance. Smoke a 3B pipe and remember these immortal lines. When to the suddenness of melody the echo parting falls, the failing day. What a rhythm. Tell them to keep their society whores and press duck with oranges. For you, l'art vivant, the living art as you call it. Tell them that you know that your shoes are broken and that there are pimples on your face. Yes, and that you have buck teeth and a club foot. But that you don't care, for tomorrow they are playing Beethoven's last quartets in Carnegie Hall, and at home you have Shakespeare's plays in one volume. After art, Shrike described suicide and drugs. When he had finished with them, he came to what he said was the goal of his lecture. My friend, I know, of course, that neither the soil, nor the South Seas, nor hedonism, nor art, nor suicide, nor drugs can mean anything to us. We are not men who swallow camels only to strain at stools. God alone is our escape. The church is our only hope. The first church of Christ's dentist, where he is worshipped as a preventer of decay. The church whose symbol is the Trinity, New Style. Father, Son, and wire-haired fox terrier. And so, my good friend, let me dictate a letter to Christ for you. Dear Miss Lonelyhearts of Miss Lonelyhearts, I am 26 years old and in the newspaper game. Life for me is a desert empty of comfort. I cannot find pleasure in food, drink, or women, nor do the arts give me joy any longer. The leopard of discontent walks the streets of my city. The lion of discouragement crouches outside the walls of my citadel. All is desolation and a vexation of the spirit. I feel like hell. How can I believe? How can I have faith in this day and age? Is it true that the greatest scientists believe again in you? I read your column, and I like it very much. There you once wrote, "When the salt has lost its savor, who shall savor it again?" Is the answer, none but the Savior? Thanking you very much for a quick reply. I remain yours truly, a regular subscriber. This is the end of part 2 of Miss Lonelyhearts by Nathanael West. Thank you for listening.